Hello, wonderful. This is Sarah, and I'm here with Dr. Alice Kerby, and you have probably seen us work together before, or you've heard me talk about her before, or you've seen her last. I'll have to see what episode you were on before. But Alice and I have connected lots of ways for lots of different reasons. And Alice, tell people a little bit about what you do, and then I'll tell people kind of some of our history.
Sure. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure. So I'm Dr. Alice Kerby. I have a clinical doctorate in physical therapy. I'm also a somatic experiencing practitioner and a recovery coach. So with somatic experiencing, I primarily work with the autonomic nervous system, which is a part of our nervous system that happens underneath our conscious control. And so I help people learn how to regulate their nervous system. I do trauma healing with somatic experiencing. It's a body-based form of healing trauma. And I work a lot with also healing chronic stress and healing anxiety. Oh, I'm also a recovery coach. I don't know if I said that. I work with women in addiction frequently too. Oh yeah, there's that part.
Oh yeah, there's that part. Yeah, and guys, I cannot tell you, when I think about the greatest gift I've given my children, it has been my work in regulating my nervous system. Like, hands down, the greatest gift I can give my children, because my kids don't feel jumpy around me. They're not waiting for me to like reach the end of my rope that I'm like blowing up all the time. And the difference in the mother that they had when they were like 3 and 5, before I had done a lot of this work, versus the mother I have as a, come on kid, like in middle school, like, right? It's not like the best time, like,
No.
to be a parent. But they're getting the best version of me. I'm still prepping for high school, right? You know, I've got working on that nervous system for high school. But Alice, I'll tell you a story. I had a friend who I was on the phone with, and my son, who I definitely think has had some experience with chronic stress, right? And has not, her solution to chronic stress is exercising a lot.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people like go down that road. Yep. And it can be helpful too. It can be a good strategy for a while, or to an extent.
Yeah, exercise is obviously a good strategy, right? You know, I mean, we need exercise. But it was interesting when my son heard me talk to her, he said, she sounds jumpy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's like, oh, you know, like, I mean, from the mouth of babes, like, kids can tell like who feels jumpy, who feels calm, who feels peaceful. So to me, I think that's one of the reasons your work is so important.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I love that you named that it's really helpful for your kids, because it's so helpful for us as individuals, but it's also really helpful for the people around us. Like I work, both with coaching clients, SE clients, and then as a physical therapist, I work with older adults, 80 and 90-year-olds. And I've noticed such a big shift even in how my patients relate to me, even though I'm not technically doing it, somatic experiencing with them, even though I subtly am all the time, by just maintaining a really well-regulated nervous system. And I'll ask them to check in with their bodies and whatnot. But the way they respond to me and the progress they make, it's markedly different. And I think I've always been a good therapist and a kind human and all of those things, but I'm just in my body and I'm well-regulated, and that affects everyone around me in a good way.
If someone if they're listening and they're like, well-regulated, what does that even mean? Like, what does it feel like to be well-regulated, or what does that mean?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think I know what it feels like for me when I'm well-regulated. One of my biggest markers, and I love this example because I think it's really relatable, is I'm not mentally judging other people. Like if I'm dysregulated, if I'm riding like a wave of anxiety, or I'm feeling like, I notice I'm more cranky in my thoughts, and I tend to be more judgmental towards others. And so what I notice when I'm in a place of being just like live and let live and really feeling that way, I always strive for that, and it's not my place to judge others and all those things, but I'm also a human. But it's interesting to have markers like that. And then as far as body-based, I just am more, I'm more relaxed. I lean back more, my shoulders drop away more. I can really come into my body very easily. Even just saying this now, I'm like aware of my legs and feet, and I just feel comfortable in myself. I feel more curious, I think, and open to what the world has to offer, what the universe has to offer. And just less like hustle bustle. I got to get this done. I have to make things happen. There's a lot less forcing and pushing, I notice, when I'm in my well-regulated place, which is more often than not these days, which is a marked difference. Because before I really did, even a couple of years ago, I was really hustling and pushing and trying to get my business to where I wanted it. And now I'm like, well, this is where I am now, and I'm doing these things to help it grow. And I don't know, I take the weekends off, and like, it's nicer, it's a nicer
Well, and
flow.
I love that you said often than not, because Alice, I want to be super honest and say in the times we've met, right now I'm in a good season.
Mm-hmm.
And there are times that you have seen me where I'm sure you were like, whoa, we were actually talking one time and I was like, here, let me move. And I fell down the stairs on the phone with Alice.
There's a lot going on though.
There was a lot going on, and there really was. And it was forgiving myself. I don't even know if forgiving myself, but grace with myself. It was like, I didn't feel well. There was a lot going on, but I want to say both of those sides, because you talked about both of those sides, and I want to say both of those sides, because I think it's really easy to say, oh, well, they've probably got it all together, or they've got this, and it's easy for them, but it's hard for me.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's a really good point that like having a well-regulated system does not mean that I'm always like calm and zen and on a cloud. I personally am not. Like I get fired up, I get excited, I do get angry, I curse at people in traffic sometimes. But like I tend to come back down to a baseline much more quicker. I don't hold on to things as much as I used to. I don't stew on them. And we're all human, right? And biologically, our systems are designed to go through these like activation and settling cycles. And I talk about this a lot in the classes that I teach, where this is part of our biology. We have a response and reaction system built in to alert us to danger and to put us on guard. And in our modern day world, like our body perceives that there's a lot of threats coming at us, even if they're not all life threatening. But if someone pulls out in front of you in a car, it's your body responds like, oh, this is a threat. So we have those surges, and we have the, hormonal cascade that comes with them. And being able to notice what's happening and then come back down naturally, that's part of having a well-regulated system too. It's like we can kind of navigate what life throws at us better without being so stuck in it. Does that make sense?
No, it makes total sense. And I have people come to me and they'll say things like, I don't want this toxic person to bother me anymore. And I was like, really? That's not what you want? Because let's say that there is a bear that comes out of the woods and our ancestors were there tending the fire, and a bear comes, and fight and flight or activated system comes in, and that is your body working.
Yeah.
Right. If your body, you don't notice there's a car that pulls out in front of you,
you're in trouble.
Right? Because you're so numb, that's a real problem. Right. So, because I think fight and flight gets a really bad reputation.
Agreed.
And it is meant to keep us safe, to like have energy or activation, right? To like face that problem. But if in my situation, in my own life, or a lot of people I talk to, it's like, oh, it's not really a bear. It's just a stuffed bear. It's just a bunny rabbit. There's no problems here. Or that car, there's no problems here. And then our bodies are like, no, we're in fight and flight. And we're like, no, It's not a problem. It's very bad.
Yeah. And that's a big part of why somatic experiencing is really helpful, because it helps us to become more discerning as we are able to come into our bodies and feel what's happening. We're able to discern like, oh, okay, maybe this is me responding to something that happened when I, 10 years ago, or when I was a kid. And all this like trauma energy is being stored in my body. So I'm always going to react this way when I see a red car, for example, like if I, have some bad negative association with the color red for a past event. And so it really is helpful to, when we start working with the nervous system, to be able to discern like, okay, this is an actual threat. This is something I'm perceiving as threatening. And then we can start trusting ourselves. We can trust when that fight or flight kicks in. You're right. It does get a bad rap, and it's silly because it's our biology. It's really when we get stuck in it, or when we're constantly overriding it, that there's trouble. But when we can learn to be in that ebb and flow with those cycles and stay with ourselves, that's I think the ticket for just an easier life.
And, my favorite question to ask is, what problem are you trying to solve? And one of the biggest tragedies that I see is there's a lot of people now, thank goodness, who are trying to, whatever they say is like, do the work, right? And I'm like using air quotes for podcast listeners, right? So they're trying to do the work, but they are not specific in their work, right? So they are working very hard, and then they almost get into like healing burnout.
Agreed. Yep.
Right? Because it's not getting them the results they're looking for. I was like, well, what problem are you trying to solve? Well, I don't know. I just thought
I want to
I'm
feel
supposed
better.
to like feel better, self-worth, confidence, but it's very generic.
Yeah, agreed. I see that a lot in the recovery world too. Like I'll have people, they'll tell me about all these problems they have, and my sort of, trauma, practitioner brain is going and I'm observing them, but they're like, well, I'm going to do, I just got to do more step work, for like people that do the 12 steps. It's good work to do. It's very, it's like a self-assessment basically. So it's helpful, but I'm like, this is like, what is that going to do for you? What problem are you trying to solve with doing more step work at this point? Like maybe try something else that's, that's actually going to heal some of your unresolved trauma if, in that instance. I think it's a great question. And I love how specific you are in the way that you work with what problem are you trying to solve? It's such a good question. I'd invite everyone to ask before they, hire a coach or hire a therapist or buy a book even. Like, what am I really looking for?
I'm obsessed with it, Allison, which is, when we
Great.
talked, I fell down the stairs and all that, in that stage of life, I was like, I've got to get this book out. I've got to get this workout, because it's like, man, there's so much hope and healing and possibility and strategy available to you. But if you are trying to milk a horse, right? Because a horse kind of looks like a cow, right? It's kind of the same thing. They have 4 legs, but I don't have a cow. I live on a horse farm, so I don't have a cow, and the horses are convenient. So I'm just going to milk this horse. And for 3 years, it's like, how's it working? It's not working. How would you feel about trying something else? Well, but it should work. I just need to like milk the horse harder, or what I'm saying? Do you see that in your own? It's heartbreaking. I mean, it makes me so sad for people, because they are trying very hard, and they're spending money, and they're spending time spending, and it's not getting them the results they're wanting.
Sometimes I do see that. Yeah. And I think it's why I really like, for anyone that works with me, I like to have like a 40-minute Zoom call with them first. And I'll ask that repeatedly, like, okay, so if, if this is XYZ is sort of the goal, I really like to ask people, how does that change your day-to-day life? Like what's different for you day to day? Like now that you have more confidence, if we use that example, and we were talking about this a little bit before, like, what does that look like for you? Does that mean you apply for a new job? Does that mean you have better boundaries with your husband? And like, because day to day is where life happens. So I'm really interested in how the changes that people are looking for, like once they've solved that problem, like how that actually affects them. And it's interesting because it's difficult for people to answer that. They'll kind of talk more big picture, and I'll sort of bring them back again. And again, I think it's a really good thing for all of us to think about, if we do want to make changes, what does that actually look like in our daily lives? So that's kind of my way of like trying to get that answer, but I think it's very hard for people to get specific.
And it is hard. And,
It is
even
hard.
people have asked the what problem are you trying to solve question, like in business settings, right? Or they'll talk to their team about it, especially people who lead younger individuals, like who, they're trying to like kind of raise them in this business world, right? And it's pretty interesting how often they don't know what problem they're trying to solve. And it's like, do we see why we're all tired and overstressed and
Yeah.
burned out? It's like if we're all trying to milk horses.
Yeah. It's like we're spinning our wheels, but we don't even have, I don't know, the wheels aren't even on a vehicle. So it's like they're just floating in
Right.
space, and they're not the same size wheel. And then we're so tired because we've been spinning the wheel all day.
So sad. So sad. So what problems does somatic therapy Is that how you exactly how you say your work? How do you, I want to be
Yes.
very
So what I do is somatic experiencing. It's the work that Dr. Peter Levine created. I know you mentioned you just listened to the Waking the Tiger book. So it's, I mean, there's all kinds of somatic therapy. This is a particular format that he developed. So that's the work that I was trained in and that I do. And it can solve, I mean, it can solve a lot of problems because I think when we have a well-regulated nervous system, everything else gets easier. But I don't like to be like, just do this and it will create like a better life. Like it will. I think it definitely does. It's been my experience. I see that in my clients. But I think it can be really helpful when people are very disconnected from self and they're just looking, like when people aren't in their bodies at all, they don't really like this work. I'll say that, but that typically it's really, really helpful for them if they can stick with it for a little while. Like if you're going around and you just don't notice you have a body at all, you feel really disconnected, you don't feel safe in your body for whatever reason, this work will change your life because it will help you to learn how to be safe and present in your body. Which again, it changes everything because it's like you're moving through your days actually being here. And not just here in your mind, but it's like you're taking up space in your physical form. It's also really good for overwhelm. Like I work with a lot of people who just have sort of general overwhelm. And again, there's not that ability to discern, I'm feeling anxious versus I'm feeling anxiety. A lot of times it comes with, I feel everything and everything is too much. So there's not discernment there, or I almost like that dissociation piece where I'm kind of numb. I don't really feel anything. Anytime I feel anything, I'm not sure how to actually tap into it. So it's helpful for overwhelm because again, we go in and like help you identify places where the system does feel okay. And we can start to build on that.
And if I may jump in, because I
Yeah,
want to relate this to some concerns of our audience. So whenever people talk about, I want to become toxic person proof, it's like, okay, we have to get your nervous system in a way to pick up the danger signals that your body will pick up.
absolutely.
Right? Your body will pick up that there's a bear rustling in the woods or a toxic person. But if you have taught your body to ignore all your body's signals,
Yep. Yeah.
right? That's really difficult because it's like there is no list of red flags. People get on the phone with me, they're like, can I have a list of red flags that if like check off the list? And I was like, I wish
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
could give that to you, right?
Yep.
And then my work would be done. You could just like check my website. I would go into like accounting. No, definitely not accounting, but it is like, yeah, that would be way easier. I wish every parent could give their child that checklist, but it would not exist because you're talking about manipulators. You're talking about people who are confusing, right? So
Yeah.
your only tool is that nervous system that's
Yeah.
going to pick up. I feel like something's wrong. I feel like something's off. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I don't trust myself as much as I did. I feel like I'm having to over explain myself. I feel like I'm having to, like, I can't exactly figure out what happened, but feels like something, right? These are all
Yeah.
things that are regulated nervous system.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And if we can,
Right?
and you're right, like when we override that, or especially if we've been gaslit and manipulated by someone for over a period of time, it's so subtle and insidious. It's hard to trust ourselves again. And like doing this work to really learn and come in, it's so huge. I've been single for a little bit over a year now. I was in a long-term relationship before that, and I don't really want to date, or I don't want to be in a relationship right now, but I was like, let me just dip my toe into dating. I've been single a year, let me try it. So I met on a couple of dates, and then it was so interesting. It was such a good learning for me because the second guy I went out with, like, I liked him, we had a lot in common. He was like pretty cool, did a lot of mountaineering and backpacking stuff, which I'm into. And I'm like, oh, neat. But it was just like a couple of things he said. I was like, ugh. And then we hadn't kissed or anything yet. And I was taking a shower one day and I was like, oh God, I'm supposed to like text this guy. And I mean, these are enough signals the way I'm talking about it, that this wasn't for me. But I'm in the shower and I was like, oh, I guess I got to kiss him to see if there's chemistry. And I like literally went, ugh. And I was like, just listen to your body. Your body is so smart at this point. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to see this guy again. But it was even for me, and I'm like a seasoned sort of a body expert, particularly in my own body, because I live in here all the time and I've done a lot of somatic work. But I was still kind of like, oh, I don't know, like trying to override it. Like maybe I should see him one more time. And it's really great when we have those moments of just like, no, trust your body. And then we do. And then as soon as I, kind of discontinued this conversation with this man, I felt different. I felt relief. And then I was like, you know what? I'm right. I don't want to date right now. This isn't where my priorities are. I don't care about being in a relationship. I want to, focus on all these other parts of my life that I really like. But I had to sort of go through that experimental period of trying it to come back to like, no, I'm right. I trust myself.
And I want to say, because people ask about like people pleasing or decision making, right? And that's what it looks like, right? I want people to hear that that's what it looks like. That's you can rewind, right? Because
yes,
I don't think there was anything faulty. So, okay, isn't there? You probably know more about this than me, but we have like our physical brain, our emotional brain, and then our language brain, right?
They're different parts of the brain. Yeah. And so like the limbic system is more the emotional brain. Yes. Then we have sort of our cognitive neocortex. Yeah.
Yes, but our like oldest brain, like our reptilian brain, right? That's where the comes in, or the nervous system, or like
absolutely.
So the way I comfort myself with this data, I'm like, okay, my reptilian brain is smarter than me, right? Because my reptilian brain is like, something's off, something's wrong. Then then my, the newer parts of our human brain, right, try to do the override.
And we're masters at overriding because our society teaches us to override. And so we have to be compassionate. And sometimes it takes little experiments like that, like date a few guys in my case and be like, oh no, this isn't what I want. Okay, great. That's super clear now. Experiment over for now. And we'll see how it is in 6 more months. But like, it's healthy to do those little experiments sometimes. And it's okay if we learn things like that. It's great. It solidifies more like deeper trust. Yeah.
And I know a lot of people in the toxic relationship space or recovery space, there's a lot of conversation about self-worth. And I'm a whole lot more interested in self-trust.
Yeah.
A lot more interested in what you just said, right? Because it's like, I think within toxic relationships, I hate that there is so much conversation around self-worth, because I think the real problem is the override.
Yeah, agreed. And the lack of self-trust that being manipulated and gaslit, leads to. And it's it's horrible. It's so insidious to do that to another person, or to have that be done to you where you literally don't trust yourself. And so learning how to like really trust your system and your body, it's like this barometer that we have that guides us through life. And this is our birthright. I mean, particularly as women, like these are part of our instinctual like characteristics that come from just being women on the planet, and we've had for so long. And I think before the patriarchy, and I won't go off on a tangent, but like, before we lived in this patriarchal society, we really were taught to like listen and hone and honor these skills. And in modern society, we're really not. And it's a shame. So coming back in and learning them is something I'm super passionate about helping other women with, because I really believe it's who we are at our core. And the fact that we've lost that or been disconnected or had it sort of, overridden out of us by society, it's like, no, I want that back. And we can have it back.
I told you a little bit before we started filming, I was reading about Winston Churchill's mother. And I've also recently read books about Henry VIII's wives. Like there's a new book on each one of, so I'm really fascinated about studying about how cultures of that time, and like, because those were the things that shaped like how we view women now, how we view relationships now, what the rules are, right? Like what all the rules are for women in society. And basically like, man, these men had no rules. Right? They were like no rules, and the women had all the rules. And she was thinking about Winston Churchill's mother was in this book was thinking about getting a divorce. Her husband was gay in a time that he could not act out being gay in his life, right? And so he was not a happy person, right? He ended up getting syphilis, which they couldn't cure, which made him insane. So he never paid attention to Winston Churchill. And someone was kind of saying like, what are you going to do on his last leg of life? She was like, I'm going to take him to tour the world. And they were like, he's really mean to you. Like he's really mean to you at this stage of his life, right? And she was like, yeah, but I can't get a divorce. It would ruin my children. Not ruin her children as in like the relationship, how we think about that now. It was like societal. Right. And she said, I can't, it would ruin my children. And they were like, this guy was like, don't, doesn't matter. And she's like, you're a man. You don't understand the rules that women have to live under.
Yep. Yeah. And it wasn't that long ago that it was I told you, I've been reading a lot of these World War II historical fiction books about women of that time period. And like, I mean, you had to have, your father, your husband to open a bank account and things like that, as far, in the 50s, the 40s, around these war times. That's why I love reading these books about these amazingly heroic women that like did show up and kind of navigated the rules.
Well, and it wasn't illegal to hit your wife until the 1970s in the US.
That's insanity.
1970s. And the most interesting story about Henry VIII was like the queen, his original queen, like Queen Catherine, right? And it made me think about the override because she had no choices.
Yeah.
Right? Like she was basically sold from Spain to the King of England. Like she had no choices. And so her only operating, so she literally didn't go crazy.
Yeah, was the override.
Was the override. It was like, okay, I've got to follow the rules. I've got to do the right thing. I've got to be a loyal right. I'm quoting right.
Mm-hmm.
Podcast listeners.
A lot of quotes are flying around.
Right. And I'm just overriding all that. And so that helps me when I think about the mistakes I've made in my own override. And it's like, man, I was like, there have been a long legacy of women who that was the best way they had to survive.
It's self-preservation. It's a survival strategy.
Yes. But it is no longer a useful survival strategy.
Yeah, hopefully for most of us, right? And for some people, it might still be, maybe the strategy is like this appease strategy where we just go along with the abuser or with whoever it is, because that is what will keep us alive. And it's important, if anyone listening can identify periods like you were just saying where they've done that. I certainly have. I was like a blackout drunk for like a lot of years because that was my strategy to like be numb and be completely distant. I don't recommend it for anyone, but all of these strategies have kept us alive. And it's really important to, honor them and thank them. And then maybe just to invite ourselves to look at our lives in a different way and decide to use a new strategy or to start trying something new, because we don't have to stay in those same patterns. Yeah.
The biggest thing our brain does not want to do, right? It's like, hey, let's just get to this new level of us, right? And like, all those strategies that were working, let's invite healthier new strategies. So if your brain is like, feels like a gorilla in a bag, like at that point, like, welcome to the healing club. That's what it looks like.
Yeah. It's like, just little by little too. I mean, I like the idea of titration. It's a somatic experiencing concept, but it's like, we don't have to do all the changing right now at once. And you need to be a completely different person by 3 p.m. Like, no, but maybe let's try one new thing today. And see how it feels and see what changes and then go from there.
Yeah, I love it. I love, go back to the idea of where in your body does feel safe or does feel okay. I really like that concept of somatic experience.
It's great. It's great. I think if anyone, this is a practice I encourage everyone to do, is just to see to notice like when you're having a pleasant experience, like when you're noticing a warm ray of sunlight or you're having a nice cup of coffee and you do feel kind of like pleasant, good, calm, comforted, you feel like yourself, to then notice like what's happening in your body in those moments. Are there areas that reflect that? Are there areas that feel expansive or settled or calm? I use good, quote unquote, because good is, I don't know, there could be a lot of things attached to it, but something that is more along the lines of pleasant, and to identify those areas and to really spend time in them. And this is such a great daily practice, is to just simply notice and spend time with how it feels in your body when you're having a pleasant experience. For me, even talking about it, I feel like warmth kind of through my lower abdomen. I feel some expansion through my chest. I kind of lean back. I look out the window at these palm trees. And it's so important for us to give ourselves, like, healing isn't all about digging around in the hard stuff. So much of it, I think, especially as we start coming into our bodies, is learning just how it feels when we feel okay. when we feel neutral, and like giving ourselves that gift. And then it helps to start teaching us regulation and that normalizing of our system so that we can identify when there's an actual threat. And so that we can like, bring ourselves back down because we have this anchor within ourselves of like, this is my experience of myself when I'm feeling pleasant.
Mhm, mhm. Love it. And
Great.
mine are my hands again. I remember us talking and I was like, okay, my jaw's a whole big mess and my hands are great. And my undergraduate degree was in piano performance. And so my hands have always felt capable and like they always like they feel good, right? Like I like my fingers. I like my, it always feels good. That's all. It was interesting. I was like, oh, it's still my hands. Like I feel like they are like
So great. Yeah.
yes, yeah. Just it's funny whenever people have like finger injuries or something. That is like my, it's like no, cut off my face. Like we're fine. Like leave the hands as they are.
My face.
Easy choice. Easy choice. Not good. My face is fine, but leave my hands. Yes.
But it's great you have the same like place over time that you can identify as like, oh, this is a place that feels really good for me in your body. And it's so fun to like explore that and find what that is for you. For anyone who's new to being in their body, just check it out, explore, be curious. It's such a great way to delve into the inner realms and to doing the nervous system work is to have curiosity about what's happening inside.
Well, Alice, where can people find more about you if they are curious about your work?
Oh, great segue. Sure. So I'm in the process of building a new website. I do have a shorter website up now. It's kerbymethodconsulting.com. Kerby is my last name. I have a YouTube channel. I think it's Dr. Alice Kerby. The links are on my site though. Yeah, I'm teaching some retreats next year. I'm teaching a retreat in California in December, a 4-day retreat. If anyone wants to actually come and learn some of this work in a beautiful location and nature with organic food, it's going to be at the Sagrada Wellness Center. But my website, and I'm also on Facebook, Alice Kerby.
And we will put all that in the show notes. We'll put all that in the show notes for you. Alice, I'm sure this is still hello, not goodbyes, as you and I continue to connect. So thank you so much for sharing your experience with us and your wisdom and helping us on our journey to becoming toxic person proof.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody.